Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The vineyard glowed with that kind of golden light you only get right before sunset, the sort that turns people's faces soft and forgiving, the kind that tricks you into thinking life might actually be fair. That was the backdrop I chose for the biggest moment of my life, my engagement party with Ethan. We had been together for 4 steady, storm-tested years, and when he got down on one knee last fall in the middle of a farmer's market, surrounded by the scent of fresh peaches and strangers clapping, it felt right. Not flashy, not Instagram perfect, just real. That's how we were. And that's what I wanted to celebrate, something real. We invited 70 people, close family, old friends, Ethan's colleagues, and a few of my coworkers I tolerated enough to smile at. The space was rustic, with strings of lights coiled above us and barrels stacked in the corners, like they weren't placed by an event planner. Everyone said it felt so you, which is always a polite way of saying it's quiet and understated, but surprisingly beautiful. It was also, for once, about me. And I don't mean that in a spoiled, attention-starved kind of way. I've spent most of my adult life playing second fiddle, letting other people speak first, brushing off comments, sharing the spotlight when I wanted it to myself. But this night? I had earned this one. Every detail down to the wine pairing had my fingerprints on it. I didn't need fireworks or a string quartet. I just wanted a peaceful evening surrounded by people who supported us. That is, until Lena walked in 20 minutes late, as always, wearing a body-hugging blush dress that screamed, "Look at me." She floated in like some damn reality TV reveal, her fiancé trailing behind her like a lost puppy, his hand protectively placed over her bump. Yes, bump. I'd suspected, but no one had said anything outright. Lena's the kind of woman who'll post cryptic ultrasound photos with no captions, then act surprised when people are confused. She came right up to me, wide-eyed and sugar-sweet, pulling me into a hug that pressed her belly between us like it had a purpose. "You look gorgeous," she said, before adding, "This place is so much cuter than I expected." I smiled, because that's what I do. Because that's what I've always done with her. The evening moved along. The food was served, the wine flowed, laughter rose in little crescendos from every table. I gave a short toast, thanking everyone, getting a little choked up when I mentioned how much Ethan meant to me. And just as I was about to pass the mic to Ethan, Lena stood up. No one had asked her to. No one even looked in her direction. But she stood anyway, her palms dramatically pressing against the table like she was bracing for a tidal wave. "I just want to say something real quick," she announced, giggling. My stomach dropped. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. Lena turned to face the crowd, our crowd, and raised her glass. "First of all, Claire, you look stunning," she said, which should have been my first clue something awful was coming. Compliments from Lena were always loaded. Then she put a hand on her stomach, and I swear the pause was deliberate. Like she was waiting for the room to lean in. And, surprise, she squealed. "I'm pregnant. 6 months today. Sorry for stealing your thunder." The room exploded. Chairs scraped, people stood to hug her, glasses clinked, and even my father, who hadn't stood when I gave my toast, got up to congratulate her. My mom's eyes welled with tears. Someone shouted, "You're glowing," and Lena waved them off like she was being modest, like she hadn't just hijacked a moment that wasn't hers to begin with. I smiled. I did. I smiled like a damn pageant queen. Because what else was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Say, "Hey, could you maybe not make my engagement party about your uterus?" No. That would have made me the problem. That would have confirmed what people already whispered, that Claire's a little uptight, a little too controlling, maybe a bit jealous of her sister. So I smiled. I sipped my wine. I told her, "That's wonderful news," like I meant it. But here's the truth. I have never hated anyone more in my life than I hated Lena in that moment. Not even for what she did, but for how perfectly on brand it was. She didn't see anything wrong with it. She probably thought it was cute. Just sisters being sisters, right? What got to me most wasn't the attention she stole. It was how everyone let her. How no one paused to consider how I might feel. How even Ethan, trying to comfort me with a hand on my thigh, looked a little mesmerized by the spectacle. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above us, something inside me clicked. This wasn't new. This was the last time. I smiled through it, but that night I didn't sleep. I planned. It didn't start at my engagement party, no matter how loud the humiliation echoed in my ears that night. It started long before then, in a suburban ranch-style house outside of Austin. The kind with beige siding and a mailbox that leaned slightly to the left like it had given up trying to stand straight. I was 7 when my mother told me she had surprising news, and I remember sitting on our plaid couch, legs dangling, as she laid her hand over her belly and beamed like this was the best day of her life. "You're going to have a baby, sister," she said, and all I remember thinking was that I didn't ask for one. Lena was born that fall, 2 days before Halloween, and the first time I saw her, I thought she looked like a wet raisin in a blanket. I asked if we could trade her for a cat. I got grounded for saying that. That was the beginning of the shift, when I stopped being the center of my parents' orbit and started being just another satellite spinning around their new favorite planet. At first, I figured it was just baby stuff, diapers, feedings, attention, but then years went by, and somehow Lena never stopped being the one everyone fussed over. She was the Goop's baby, the miracle, the little blessing my mom Denise couldn't stop talking about, especially when she'd had a couple of glasses of boxed wine and started in on how God knew our family needed one more. It's wild how people will call a child a miracle just because she showed up late and loud. I was the planner, the reliable one, the kid who colored inside the lines and brought home A's like it was a job interview. Lena was chaos in glitter form, loud, clumsy, dramatic, and somehow always the one people forgave first. When I turned 16, I had my party at a roller rink that doubled as an event space. I'd begged for that night for months, even picked out the music playlist and a weird lavender dress with ruffled sleeves that I thought made me look grown up. Lena was 12 and already trying to flirt with boys in braces. 15 minutes into my party, she walked onto the rink floor, turned pale, and fainted right there, mid-glide, like some tragic movie heroine. The whole place rushed to her side, and I remember watching my dad carry her out while someone played Total Eclipse of the Heart in the background. I ended up cutting my cake alone while everyone hovered in the parking lot. Lena had been like this for literally over 25 years, ever since I was in 2nd grade, and she was born 6 months later. That's not even biologically possible, but the truth is I still sometimes believe it. It feels that wrong. Then came my college graduation. I had worked my ass off for 4 years at the University of Texas, graduated with honors, nailed my internship, and landed a job before the ceremony even happened. My mom and dad sat in the 3rd row, holding one of those embarrassing posters with my name in glitter paint. I gave the speech for our class. It was supposed to be my moment. Then, right as I came off the stage, Lena pulled out her phone, posted a photo of her hand with a diamond ring, no caption, just a heart. Within 20 minutes, all the comments from our family had shifted from "Congrats, Claire" to "OMG, Lena." When I confronted her later, she said, "I didn't know you'd be mad." It just felt like the right time. It always did with her. The right time, the right spotlight, the right way to pull the attention just slightly off-center and land it on her instead. My mom told me to stop being dramatic. My dad said she didn't mean anything by it. That was the line they both used for years. She didn't mean anything by it. But what if she did? What if that's exactly what she meant? By the time the engagement party fiasco happened, I wasn't just hurt. I was tired. Tired of forgiving, tired of brushing things off, tired of pretending that being the bigger person made me noble when it mostly just made me invisible. Everyone had given her a free pass for so long that when I finally took mine away, I knew it was going to sting. And maybe that's what I wanted. Not just revenge, but recognition. This time, I wasn't just gonna let it slide. I woke up the morning after the engagement party feeling like someone had taken sandpaper to the inside of my chest. Not sharp enough to kill me, just rough enough to keep scraping at me all day. Ethan rolled over, kissed my shoulder like nothing had happened, and whispered something soft and loving, but I couldn't hear a word of it over the echo of Lena's voice in my head. Sorry for stealing your thunder. Like she was a cartoon villain trying to make the entire room laugh at my expense. She had succeeded. And I had smiled. That was the part that kept making me sick, how well I'd smiled through it. We were supposed to be finalizing the catering that week, picking floral arrangements, and signing off on the table layout for our planned 200-guest wedding at a hotel just outside of Waco. It was classic, expensive, and probably a little too formal for the people we were inviting, but I'd convinced myself that going big meant going right. That if I did everything the correct way, the fairy tale ending would finally come knocking like it did in movies. But now I didn't want a fairy tale. I wanted peace. And maybe a little justice. I looked at Ethan, sitting at the breakfast table, sipping his black coffee while scrolling through emails, and said, "What if we didn't do the big wedding?" He blinked twice like I'd spoken in another language. What if we just changed everything? We'd already spent close to $9,000 on deposits, but I didn't even flinch at the idea of walking away from it all. That money could burn if it meant I got a day without drama, without whispered comparisons, without someone else's big news overshadowing mine. Ethan, God bless him, didn't argue. He said, "Whatever you want, I'm with you." And I believed him, maybe more in that moment than ever before. I spent the next 2 days pretending to still be in planning mode. I even posted a Pinterest board update just to keep up the illusion. But in reality, I was calling a small bed-and breakfast in Telluride, Colorado, a place I'd found once during a weekend rabbit hole of elopement videos. The place was tucked into a hilltop overlooking a valley, surrounded by pines and wildflowers. It was quiet, intimate. It felt like a wedding should feel personal, not performative. I only invited 25 people, not out of spite, but out of clarity. People who had truly shown up for us, Ethan's parents, 2 of my old college friends, my cousin Michelle, who always stood up for me at family dinners when things got awkward, and a handful of others who would understand why we kept it small. Lena was not one of them. And that decision wasn't made in anger, it was made with surgical precision. But here's the twist, I didn't freeze her out completely. I didn't block her. I didn't uninvite her because that would have been too obvious, too aggressive, too easy for people to take her side. Instead, I played it polite. I told her we were still deciding on the date, and that things were up in the air with the venue, and that we might push it back till spring, knowing full well we were getting married in 4 weeks. She replied with a thumbs up and a meme about wedding stress, which felt like a cosmic joke. Now here's where it gets strategic. I invited a mutual family friend, let's call her Teresa, who has known Lena since middle school and cannot keep a secret to save her life. At brunch with Teresa, I accidentally let it slip that we were thinking of late March in Colorado, but asked her to please not say anything yet because it's still low-key and not official. I watched her eyes sparkle with curiosity, and I knew that little breadcrumb was all she'd need to blow the whole loaf wide open. I could have just told Lena straight up that she wasn't welcome. But what fun is that? What satisfaction is there in drawing a hard line when you can make someone trip over it instead? I wanted her to hear about the wedding from someone else, someone she trusted. I wanted her to feel that flicker of confusion, of exclusion, of realizing that for once, the center of attention didn't have a chair for her. And more than that, I wanted her to question whether she even deserved one. Over the next few days, I carefully curated the silence. No group texts. No save the dates. I called people individually, made them feel chosen, special. And I made damn sure no one posted a word about it online. This wasn't just a secret wedding, it was a quiet rebellion. The guest list came together perfectly. Ethan and I booked our flights, arranged for a local photographer who specialized in elopements, and even found a folk duo to play acoustic covers during the ceremony. Every little detail felt like balm on a wound I didn't even realize had gone so deep. With every step, I felt lighter. And I think Ethan did too. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he was relieved not to have to pretend excitement for a party that had started to feel like a performance. 3 weeks out, Teresa texted me, "So, Lena just asked if you're really getting married in Colorado? Did you tell her yet?" I waited a few minutes. Then I wrote back, "Nope. But I guess now she knows." I knew exactly what would happen next. And I needed it to happen. The morning of my wedding, I opened the curtains of our little suite in Telluride and saw nothing but blue sky, frost-glazed evergreens, and the slow curl of sunlight coming over the mountains like someone had peeled back the clouds just for me. The kind of silence that morning held was rare, the kind you feel in your bones, like the world's finally stopped screaming and just exhaled. I stood there barefoot on the wooden floor, wrapped in a hotel robe that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, holding my coffee like it might float out of my hands if I loosened my grip. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for someone to steal my joy. No spotlight was being shared today. This day, this view, this peace, this moment belonged to me. We'd flown in 2 days earlier with nothing but 2 suitcases and a box carrying my dress, which I hadn't even tried on in full until the night before. Ethan had spent the evening reading through his vows on the balcony, nervously mumbling to himself, while I sat inside with a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of tea, listening to the snowmelt drip off the roof like a lullaby. There were no bridesmaids, no groomsmen, no arguments over seat placements or flower girl tantrums. Just us and 25 handpicked people who didn't ask for extra +1s or gossip about what wasn't said. We married on a wooden deck overlooking the valley, with chairs set in a crescent and garlands of white roses hanging behind us. My cousin Michelle stood beside me, holding the small bundle of peonies I had picked out myself, and Ethan's older brother officiated with a humor that somehow felt holy. We wrote our own vows, but didn't memorize them. We stumbled through words and choked on emotion. I saw tears in Ethan's eyes, and I didn't care who saw mine. The ceremony was short, honest, stripped down, not designed to impress, but to mean something. And it did. Every damn second of it meant something. My phone stayed off, zipped into the pocket of my clutch the whole day because I knew better than to tempt fate. But after the last piece of cake had been devoured, after the dancing had turned into slow sipping and fire pit conversations, I stepped into the hallway outside the dining room and turned it back on. The first notification came before the lock screen had even loaded fully. "Have you seen what Lena just posted?" Then another, "Girl, check Instagram now." And a third, "Wow, she really went there." I opened the app with a sense of calm, not dread, because some part of me had always known, that she wouldn't take this quietly. And sure enough, there it was. A grainy black and white photo of her staring dramatically out of a window, hand on her pregnant belly, and the caption screamed like a wounded animal. "Some people are so jealous they'd rather get married behind your back than share their big day." I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't laugh. I smirked because that reaction, that messy, insecure explosion, that was exactly the point. But here's the part she didn't know, because self-absorbed people rarely notice the details that don't serve them. I had sent her an invitation. A real one. Cream card doc, engraved lettering, the whole 9 yards. I'd sent it to her house with a tracking number, scheduled to arrive exactly 2 days after the wedding, perfectly timed to coincide with the wave of congratulatory posts I knew our guests would start sharing once they were back in cell range. It wasn't just about excluding her, it was about letting her know she'd been almost included. That I'd thought of her. That I'd considered her presence. And then, with precise intention, I'd chosen otherwise. You don't erase years of being overshadowed with one moment. You do it with a slow burn. You make a choice, then another, and you keep going until one day, they're no longer the center of your narrative. They're just a footnote. The best part? No one else knew. Not even Ethan. To everyone else, Lena's meltdown looked like just another tantrum. But to me, it was a quietly loaded victory. I could picture her scrolling through tagged photos, seeing cousins smiling in the snow, aunts wrapped in shawls, Ethan and I locked in a kiss with the valley behind us. She wasn't just left out, she was left out on purpose, and the worst part was, she couldn't even call me out for it without admitting how much it mattered to her. That night, back in our room, I lit a candle by the window and finally let myself breathe. Ethan had fallen asleep already, one arm curled under a pillow, completely oblivious to the storm brewing online. I watched the snow start falling again, tiny flurries catching the moonlight like ash. My phone buzzed once, then again, and then rang. It was her. The name flashed up on my screen like a bad omen, but I let it ring until voicemail picked up. A minute later, another call, then a message. She called me that night and said something I'll never forget. The first voicemail came in just after midnight, when the fire in our room had dimmed down to red glowing coals and the snow outside was falling heavy enough to bury everything in silence. I had left my phone face down on the dresser, the screen lighting up the wall every time it buzzed like a silent scream begging to be heard. Ethan was already asleep, his breathing slow and steady beside me, still tucked in the afterglow of the most peaceful day of our lives. But I wasn't asleep. I had that feeling you get after a storm when the sky's cleared, but the air still tastes like electricity, like something's waiting just around the corner to strike again. I waited until the screen stilled, then picked up the phone and played the voicemail without listening to the rest of the notifications. Lena's voice came through the speaker sharp and breathless, the kind of angry that's only born when someone feels small and exposed and doesn't know what to do with the shame. She didn't start with hello. She didn't even use my name. She went straight for the kill. You think you're clever, Claire? You think this was some brilliant revenge plot? That you finally made your point? Her voice cracked, not from tears, but from something more bitter, like pride being swallowed and coming back up sharp. I cannot believe you'd do this. You humiliated me. You humiliated the entire family. You're a selfish, spiteful. I stopped the message right there. Not because it hurt, but because I already knew the script. I've heard it in one form or another for years. That tone, that high-horsed outrage, as if my boundaries were some kind of crime against the natural order where Lena always wins. But the second voicemail? That one was different. It came 5 minutes later, and I knew even before I hit play that something had shifted. Her voice was lower this time, broken at the edges, like all the fight had burned off and left only the wreckage. I don't know why you hate me so much, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't know what I did that made you want to cut me out like that. But it really hurt, Claire. It really, really hurt. There it was. Not an apology. Not an admission. Just pain. And even though it came wrapped in her usual self-pity, for the first time in a long time, I heard something real underneath it. And maybe that's why I called her back. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been staring at her screen the whole time, just waiting. I didn't say hello either. I just said, you knew what you were doing at my engagement party. There was a pause. And then, flatly, she said, are you really going to hold that over me forever? Forever. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because she made it sound like I'd been carrying a grudge since the dawn of time when it had only been weeks. Lena, you made my engagement about you. You stood up and hijacked a moment that wasn't yours. You've been doing that my entire life. This was the first time I took something back. So you thought what? She snapped. I deserved it? You thought it would feel good to make me look like an idiot. No, I said, steady and quiet. I didn't do it to make you look like anything. I did it so I could finally look like me, without you standing in front of me, demanding the spotlight. She was silent after that. Long enough that I wondered if she was crying or just trying to come up with something smart to say. But then she hit me with it, something that cracked the door open just a little. I never meant to take anything from you, she said. I never felt like I had anything of my own unless I made people look. I should have felt something big in that moment, relief, empathy, sadness, but all I felt was tired. Not angry, not even smug. Just tired. I know, I said. But you always took it from me. And this time, I didn't let you. She exhaled, the kind of breath that lets you know the conversation's ending but nothing's really been resolved. Then she said, "You didn't have to be cruel about it." And I said, "And you didn't have to make my life a stage you keep crashing." She hung up. The silence in the room afterward was louder than the conversation had been. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the outline of our wedding clothes still hanging on the closet door, wondering if I'd finally found peace or just a new kind of wound. Ethan stirred behind me and asked, barely awake, "Did it help? Getting even?" I didn't answer him right away. I walked to the window, pressed my hand against the cold glass, and watched the snow turn the world white again. "I don't know," I finally said. "But at least this time, it was my thunder."